Allow this appointment lightly. The council does not.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master.
What?
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, it's time to temper some arches, because as of this point, we've had all of the arch-tempered monsters for wilds that will be coming to the game, and with these arch-tempered monsters feeling so different from the other arch-tempered monsters we've had in the series in the past, I felt the need to rank them all against each other, talk about what I liked and what I didn't, and to be clear, this ranking for me is less about how I enjoy the arch-tempered fight in a vacuum by itself, and more about how much I think the arch-tempered version improved the experience of the regular monster. How much better is the arch-tempered version compared to the regular fight is the main thing that I'm trying to judge, with of course maybe a small bit of extra bias towards me enjoying certain movesets when they're close to each other in actual ranking for arch-temperedness, and a reminder that this is my personal list, so you might have different opinions than I do, and if so, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. That said, just to really show the improvement of it all over time, let's go by game, starting with the first ones that released in Monster Hunter World. And at this time, arch-tempered was only a thing that was being applied to elder dragons specifically, which makes the change up in wilds for things that aren't even elders a bit more interesting. That said, first is arch-tempered Kirin in the goddamn F tier. There were no real noticeable moveset changes, but it was statistically way beefier than regular tempered Kirin, who was already a fight that a lot of people weren't a big fan of, and a lot of people think that it was even faster than normal Kirin too, as the main change here, just less recovery time between attacks on an already iconically fast monster. It's not like it's awful in the grand scheme of like video game combat, but it basically added nothing new to the original fight and wasn't very fun beyond the concept of being the first of a new quest type in the game. Next up, Valhazak in the D tier. I like Valhazak quite a bit as a monster, but he was the second arch-tempered, and this was when they were still doing barely any changes to an arch-tempered, other than like raw stat boosts to make them slightly more challenging fights. And the thing is, he did actually have a couple of changes. They were minor, but they did affect the fight. His effluvium tick rate was a little bit faster, a couple of his attacks would hit twice instead of only once, which would counter weapons that have counters or guarding or stuff like that, and he had beams that could come from a different direction. Normally they would only come from one direction, but arch-tempered could put them from a different way, which sort of changed the way that you had to position at least a little bit. So this is basically an example of minimal changes, but taking a monster that was a bit of a punching bag and making him at least a bit less of a punching bag, a little bit more challenging, which I think is an important aspect of some arch-tempered fights too. Then in the C tier we have Teostra. Teostra got a couple of new attacks in his arch-tempered version, and this was sort of the first example of them giving us a tease of changes already planned for Master Rank. The changes weren't overly major, but it's still way more difference than anything that I've placed below this tier on the list by a pretty good margin. After that we have Kushala Daora, and Kushala is in the D tier. He's an interesting one because he did get a couple of changes, sort of, but I just find them irritating more than anything, so I feel the need to rate him above bottom tier because he has these differences, but I still don't enjoy the fight any more than his normal version. Specifically, they made it so flash pods don't knock him out of the sky, and they carried this forward for other arch-tempereds as well, but it's the worst against Kushala, as that is the main way that you can keep him from being out of the sky in the version of him from World. This was improved with Kushala in Rise and Sunbreak, but that is a different fight entirely, and of course doesn't apply to the arch-tempered version at all. Sometimes the arch-tempered version of him, when being flashed, would force him to come back down to the ground, but it removes the knockdown component of flashes, which sucks quite a bit. The other big thing, partially just a paired result of the first change, is that he just spends even more time flying around in the air, and his wind aura is even more obnoxious, and most weapons just don't get to do much against Kushala in those moments. Then we have Lunastra, also in the D tier. She got some extra wind pressure on her big supernova attack, which is an addition to the fight, even if it's one that frustrates people mid-quest. And then her other big change isn't really her herself, it's just that part of the quest conditions make arch-tempered Teostra show up during the quest, and then stick around until they do their big bond attack, their sort of turf war type move, which is a gigantic supernova from both of them. So that is a cool cinematic moment in the fight, at least, of those things clearly put it above arch-tempered Kirin, but it's still below Teostra for me personally. Then we have Zora Magdaros in the C tier, which some people might find controversial. I honestly considered even putting him up in the B tier for me personally, but it felt maybe a bit too much even for me. The entire reason for this is, while it is still Zora Magdaros, which means you are barely properly fighting a monster in the quest, it is such a massive improvement against regular Zora Magdaros, simply due to the time pressure. The time limit and the increased health and threshold mean that unlike the normal quest against Zora, you don't really end up with time where you're just sort of sitting around waiting for things to happen. It's no longer a foregone conclusion that the quest is going to end in a success, and instead it feels a lot more like an intense siege operation that you actually have to be really efficient with. It's life or death, not just for you, for the people around you, but for pretty much the entire landmass that you live on. I know it might be an over-the-top reaction, maybe it's nostalgia at this point, but I just remember thinking the original Zora fight was funny and maybe a bit cinematic, but not a whole lot else than that. But Arch Tempered Zora made it feel way more like an actual event taking place in the world, a thing that you were actively working as hard as possible to stop, even if the fighting wasn't the standard way that you fight in Monster Hunter. After that, we have Arch Tempered xeno'jiiva breaking into the A tier as its first entry, and this could be nostalgia goggles as well, but I loved Arch Tempered xeno'jiiva. I remember it very fondly as one of the best Arch Tempered that they made. It had a bunch of new moves, it left ground damage puddles on the floor in its final phase, and they just made what was originally very much a spectacle fight so much more intense and so much more mechanically engaging as well. As someone who was an absolute noob when I first fought xeno'jiiva in the story, and then basically went through a multi-month training montage learning and improving at the game until Arch Tempered Xeno came out, it felt like a return to my Monster Hunter baby days, which is a bit of a unique bonus for my personal opinion on it, for my personal journey through the series, and it's definitely formed from my experiences here, and it might not line up with everyone else's, but even so, I still think this is objectively one of the best Arch Tempereds that existed before Wilds came out, if not just the best. Next up is Kulvtaroth, who I have in the B tier. She has a number of new moves. She gets an extra phase essentially with the Fury mode in the final phase, and the devs thought that she went over so well that you now can't even do regular high rank Kulvtaroth anymore because it's been replaced by Arch Tempered Kulvtaroth. That's the only version that you can do in high rank. It just straight up replaced the original fight, which is honestly very funny to me. Overall though, most of the fight is fairly familiar with just the final phase having the changes, which is the main reason that I think this is the right tier for this one. Then we have Nergigante, who I have in the B tier with Kulvtaroth, and he was sort of treated the same way that Arch Tempered arkveld is now, in the sense that he was the final Arch Tempered of the base game, he was the flagship of that game, and he was made incredibly challenging as a fight as a result. Arguably one of the hardest fights in base world. As far as the actual changes, he only got like one proper new move, but it was another dive bomb that was fast and he could do it frequently, which ended up being one of the master rank Runer Nergigante attacks, and just in general he was incredibly quick and much harder to abuse. The spike part break mechanic for knockdowns too. That said, there weren't a large amount of changes for him, but the impact of the changes that they did were massive, and it changed the entire atmosphere of the fight, and it was one that I did quite enjoy compared to all the others on the list that I have placed below it. Next up we have Namielle in the C tier, which is a shame because I adore Namielle as a base monster, but her Arch Tempered version just had an extremely minimal amount of changes. The main ones were that she could do her Nova multiple times in a row without needing to properly charge up her water mode again, and that she could bounce ranged ammo off of her wings. In other words, not really anything new in the actual moveset, so much as changes to how the moveset can be done and how she functions. I believe there was also stuff like a beam could come from a different angle than it normally would, but it was all quite minor changes compared to Nergigante being the most recent Arch Tempered before that. After that, Velkhana coming in hot, or cold, in the B tier. For me, Velk actually got a good few changes, some combo changes to try and throw you off of your normal timings and pattern knowledge from the regular Velkhana, a couple of new attacks or modified versions of the original attacks too, and like Namielle, it doesn't lose its big power mode after doing its big attack like the normal monster does, so while regular Velkhana is not my favorite monster, and I've talked about that at length in the past, I do think it was in the very upper tier of Arch Tempered variations done before the 6th generation. That said, it is now time to move on to the 6th generation with Wild's Arch Tempereds, which are just such a massive jump up above the rest of the crowd on average. First up is Raidao in the S tier. His entire fight is full of aftershocks on every attack that he does, which completely changes up the flow of the fight in very meaningful ways. It changes how you have to treat him, and it makes you respect his attacks in a way that you wouldn't have previously. It gives the entire fight a different vibe, especially for weapons that have counters or guard as a heavy mechanic of the weapon, and that is made even more interesting by the fact that you can disable the aftershocks by targeting specific body parts and doing enough damage to them, and I just really enjoy that change on the whole. Not to mention that he does actually get a proper new attack with the mini railgun that shoots him up into the air off the recoil of it too, and overall it's both a big difference and a good difference from the original fight, and one of my favorite Arch Tempereds that they've done. Then we have Duna next up in the A tier. Nothing quite as overarchingly different as the aftershocks for Raidao, but it does make a lot of waves that disrupt your movement, and it has a new, faster belly flop, barrel roll attack, and some things where it like slithers around the arena and then catches you off guard from behind. So multiple new attacks in the moveset and some changes up to combo order as well. Just a very, very solid Arch Tempered monster, just not quite in the same tier as Raidao in my opinion. Following that, we have new Udra, who I also have in the A tier. Multiple new attacks. The big oil explosions, some of the larger gap closers in this are new too, which is quite fun. And then honestly, the fact that it just emits environmental damage from its body while heated, not even just heat damage that could be countered with a cool drink, but full on environmental damage. So people end up genuinely building adaptability into their build to be able to counter that mechanic entirely. And then once they did, everyone called it easy. But the thing is, that means this Arch Tempered monster forced you to put unique utility skills into your build that you would not use for any other fight in the game. And in my mind, that is a pretty big success for what an Arch Tempered monster is trying to do. Next up, dahaad joining the S tier, just massive changes across the entire moveset, multiple new attacks like the big tail sweep and the blink and you miss it arcing beam, but it also just multiple different ways of comboing the attacks it already has. A lot of attacks that used to just do once and then move on now happen twice in a row, and things like some ice explosions leaving behind a storm on the ground that constantly applies frostblade, which directly exists to counter players punishing an opening that existed in the original dahaad fight. It's like he's built directly to counter your pattern knowledge from the regular monster, and the fight is super satisfying in my opinion, on top of just how different it actually feels too. Finally then, you could probably see this coming a mile away, arkvled up in the S+ tier, the only monster there on his own. What is there to say that I haven't already in recent times? He has loads of new attacks, loads of new combos. He has a full-on new phase in the fight where he uses Wilk energy and then combos that Wilk energy with his dragon damage to make bonus explosions, and this unlocks basically a whole new section of moveset that he doesn't normally have, and you basically just have to treat arkveld, Arch Tempered, very differently than the normal version of the monster. The challenge of this fight is way up compared to normal, and yes, challenge doesn't necessarily equal good in all instances, but this is one of those cases where it's both quite challenging and very satisfying to fight, and it's a very cool amount of changes that they've made in the way that they've done it. It's a fun fight even when he's smashing you, and that's the best kind of difficult fight. For all intents and purposes, he might as well just basically be a variant monster with how different he is and the ways that they've changed him, and especially with him fully utilizing a different tool set with the Wilk energy itself. It is just fantastic. That just about does it for today, then everyone. My full tier list of all Arch Tempered monsters in the series so far, and I do of course expect that we will have more in the expansion for Wilds when that happens, so I have high hopes that they will push the bar even further on it, because arkveld is probably an anomaly rather than a new standard, but it would be so cool if that was the way that all Arch Tempered monsters were treated, you know? I hope you've all enjoyed the video, and let me know your own thoughts on the Arch Tempered monsters in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.